One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. C.G. Jung. The knife slipped into the darkness between his ribs with almost no resistance. David felt nothing at first, just pressure, then warmth spreading across his side. Time slowed as he looked into the eyes of his attacker, not a stranger but his own reflection, distorted in the fractured mirror of his consciousness. This wasn't a physical assault, but something far more devastating, the moment when his carefully constructed identity collapsed under the weight of a truth he could no longer deny. Have you ever wondered why the most painful criticisms are the ones that secretly echo what we already believe about ourselves? The paradox of vulnerability. Psychologist Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." His words lingered in the silent therapy room as Dr. Eleanor West studied her newest patient. David sat across from her, successful by every external measure, decorated military background, thriving security consulting business, picture-perfect family, yet something was unraveling inside him. "I shouldn't even be here," he said, his voice a controlled fortress. "My wife thinks I need help. Apparently I'm emotionally unavailable." The quotation marks hung heavy in the air between them. "And what do you think?" Dr. West asked. "I think emotions are luxuries I can't afford in my line of work." He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Weakness gets people killed. This is the illusion most of us live within, the belief that strength means building impenetrable walls around our vulnerabilities. We see it every day, the father who cannot cry in front of his children, the executive who masks uncertainty with aggression, the teenager who cultivates detachment to avoid the pain of rejection. Modern society celebrates the stoic warrior, the unflappable leader, the person who rises above emotional distress. But what if this commonly accepted wisdom is exactly backward? The shadow self, a philosophical journey. Friedrich Nietzsche proposed that he who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. When you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. This warning about the transformative nature of our battles rings particularly true when the monster we fight is ourselves. David's first assignment in therapy seemed simple: journal about moments when he felt disproportionately angry or defensive. The exercise proved to be anything but simple. "I don't understand the point of this," he told Dr. West in their second session, the journal unopened on his lap. "I'm not an angry person." "Really?" she responded. "Tell me about the incident with your daughter's teacher last month." His jaw tightened. "That was different. She suggested Mia might have attention problems." "My daughter isn't defective." "Defective," Dr. West repeated softly. Interesting word choice. The silence that followed was heavier than any confession. In Plato's allegory of the cave, prisoners mistake shadows for reality because they've never known anything else. Jung expanded this concept into what he called the shadow, those aspects of ourselves that we've disowned, pushed into the darkness of our unconscious, because they contradict who we believe we should be. For David, who had survived a childhood with an abusive father who called him stupid and worthless, the suggestion that his daughter might be anything less than perfect activated a primal wound. His rage wasn't about her teacher, it was about what he feared might be true, that imperfection was unacceptable, that he had failed as a parent, that perhaps his father had been right about him all along. These shadows are not simply emotional baggage, they form what Jung called complexes, concentrated knots of feeling that operate autonomously within our psyche, hijacking our conscious intentions when triggered. The neuroscience of projection. Modern neuroscience confirms what Jung intuited. Using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, researchers at Stanford University found that when subjects were confronted with qualities they had denied in themselves, but unconsciously possessed, the brain's defense mechanisms activated instantaneously, faster than conscious thought could intervene. This defense mechanism, projection, is the psychological equivalent of a magician's misdirection. Rather than face what we can't accept in ourselves, we cast it onto others and attack it there. The homophobic politician later discovered in a gay affair, the anti-corruption crusader with hidden financial improprieties, the parent who punishes in their child the very behaviors they themselves display. These are not merely hypocrisies, but unconscious attempts to resolve internal conflicts by externalizing them. For David, the breakthrough came unexpectedly in his third month of therapy. "My son asked me why I never tell him I'm proud of him," he said, voice unnaturally steady. "I told him I shouldn't have to say it, that he should know." "And does he know?" Dr. West asked. "How could he not? I attend every game, every school event, I'm there." Being physically present isn't the same as being emotionally present, David. That's what my wife says. His hands gripped the armrests. My father never came to anything, not once. So you're different from him. Completely different. And yet, Doctor, West said gently, you still can't say the words your son needs to hear. The room seemed to shrink. David's breathing quickened. I want to, he finally whispered. But every time I try, it's like something locks up inside me. I hear my father's voice. Don't coddle the boy, you'll make him soft. The voice you hear, that's not your authentic voice, Dr. West explained. That's the internalized voice of your father. In psychological terms, it's called an introject, an aspect of someone else that you've absorbed into your own psyche. This insight represents the intersection of Jungian psychology and modern attachment theory. According to research by Dr. Gabor Mate, these introjects form during our earliest relationships, creating implicit relational patterns that operate beneath conscious awareness. The brain literally wires itself according to these formative experiences, establishing neural pathways that automatically activate in similar situations decades later. A 2018 study published in the journal Neuropsychologia found that these emotional memory systems operate independently from our declarative memory, meaning we can intellectually know that our reactions are irrational while still being powerless to prevent them. The emotional brain responds approximately 80,000 times faster than the rational brain, giving our unconscious patterns a significant head start. The turning point, another way of seeing David's journey, reached a critical juncture during a session 6 months into his therapy. The previous week, his company had lost a major contract to a competitor. I haven't slept since it happened, he admitted. Keep going over what I could have done differently. What's the story you're telling yourself about what this means? Dr. West asked. He looked confused. It means I failed. That's the meaning you've assigned to it. But is that the only possible interpretation? David stared at her. What would you tell your daughter if she lost an important competition? She pressed. That's different. She's a child. Humor me. He sighed. I'd tell her that losing is part of life, that what matters is how you respond to setbacks. And do you believe that's true? Of course. Then why doesn't it apply to you? The question hung in the air, unanswerable within his existing framework. It created what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that occurs when we hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously. This dissonance is painful but necessary for transformation. Research in neuroplasticity shows that this kind of mental impasse can actually forge new neural pathways, allowing different parts of the brain to communicate in ways they haven't before. A 2020 study from the Max Planck Institute demonstrated that emotional insight, the aha moment of psychological breakthrough, produces a unique pattern of brain activation that can override previously automatic responses. For David, this moment cracked open something long sealed within him. For the first time, he saw clearly the double standard by which he had been living: compassion for others, but merciless perfectionism for himself. I think, he said slowly, I've been trying to prove my father wrong my entire life. Dr. West nodded. And has it worked? No. His voice broke on the word. Because no matter what I achieve, it's never enough to silence his voice. This recognition represents what Jung called the confrontation with the shadow, the painful but liberating moment, when we see our projections for what they are. The parts of ourselves we've rejected don't disappear, they go underground, sabotaging our relationships and draining our energy. The Alchemy of Integration Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield describes this process as taking the one seat, the willingness to be present with all aspects of our experience, especially the painful ones. This mindful presence initiates a neurobiological cascade that's been extensively documented by researchers like Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. When we turn toward our pain, rather than away from it, the brain's fight-or-flight response begins to deactivate. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for integration and coherence, strengthens its connections to the limbic system, our emotional center. This neural integration allows us to respond rather than react, to choose rather than be compelled. For David, the path forward wasn't about conquering his shadow, but about reclaiming it. The vulnerability he had spent his life fleeing wasn't weakness, it was the gateway to authentic strength. I want you to try something, Dr. West suggested. The next time you feel that automatic resistance to expressing pride or affection toward your son, don't fight it. Just notice it. Say to yourself, this is my father's voice, not mine. I'm afraid of being vulnerable because I was taught it's dangerous. And then what? And then make a conscious choice about what you want to do, not what your conditioning dictates. This approach draws on both ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science. Mindfulness practices have been shown to create what neuroscientists call response flexibility, the capacity to pause between stimulus and response, creating space for choice, where once there was only automatic reaction. A landmark study, published in Nature Neuroscience, found that as little as 8 weeks of mindfulness practice produced measurable changes in the amygdala, reducing its reactivity to emotional triggers. Simultaneously, the practice strengthened connections between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, enhancing emotional regulation. The shadow transformed. 3 weeks later, David returned with an experience that marked a turning point. "My son scored the winning goal in his soccer game," he said. "Afterward, I felt that familiar tightness in my chest when I wanted to tell him how proud I was. But this time, I just observed it. I actually said to myself, 'What you suggested. This is my father's voice, not mine.' What happened? The strangest thing, the tightness didn't go away, but it shifted, like I could feel it without being controlled by it." He paused, "And then I told my son I was proud of him, not just for scoring, but for how hard he's been practicing." How did he respond? David's eyes glistened. He hugged me, said "Thanks, Dad," like it was the most natural thing in the world. "And how did you feel?" "Terrified," he admitted, with a small laugh, "and then lighter somehow, like I'd put down something heavy I'd been carrying without realizing it." This experience illustrates what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to create a third position that transcends opposing forces within us. The shadow, when acknowledged, begins to yield its energy for constructive purposes, rather than unconscious sabotage. Research in post-traumatic growth supports this understanding. Studies of individuals who have successfully integrated traumatic experiences show that confronting painful truths often leads to greater psychological flexibility, deeper relationships, and a more authentic sense of self. What was once a source of shame becomes a wellspring of wisdom and compassion. Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability confirms this counterintuitive truth. What we think makes us weak, our openness to hurt, rejection, and failure, is actually the foundation of courage, innovation, and connection. In her longitudinal studies, the people who demonstrated the greatest resilience weren't those who avoided vulnerability, but those who embraced it consciously. The path forward, from shadow to light. As months passed, David's relationship with his shadow continued to evolve. The work wasn't linear or easy. There were setbacks, resistances, and discoveries that shook his sense of identity to its core. Yet gradually, the energy he had spent maintaining his defenses became available for creative expression and genuine connection. "I had this dream last night," he told Dr. West near the end of their work together. "I was in a dark house, searching for an intruder. I was terrified, but determined to protect my family. When I finally cornered him and turned on the light, I saw myself, but not as I am now. It was me as a child, maybe 7 or 8, crying and frightened." "What did you do?" Dr. West asked. "In the dream, I put down my weapon and knelt beside him. I told him he was safe now, that I wouldn't let anyone hurt him again." David's voice steadied. "When I woke up I was crying, but it didn't feel like sadness. It felt like release." This dream captures the essence of shadow integration, the moment when what was feared becomes what is embraced. Jung believed that our dreams often show us what our conscious mind is not yet ready to acknowledge, offering a bridge between the known and unknown aspects of ourselves. Neurologically, this integration activates what interpersonal neurobiologist Dr. Daniel Siegel calls the resonance circuit, the brain's capacity for self-compassion and self-regulation. Studies using fMRI scans show that when we extend compassion toward our own suffering, the brain activates the same care circuits that light up when we respond to the suffering of others. For David, this growing capacity for self-compassion gradually transformed his relationships. He became more present with his children, more vulnerable with his wife, more authentic in his leadership at work. Paradoxically, by acknowledging his fears and insecurities, he became more resilient, not less. "The odd thing," he reflected in one of their final sessions, "is that I started this process thinking I needed to get rid of something, this weakness I couldn't stand in myself. But it turns out the real work was about reclaiming parts of myself I'd abandoned." That's the essence of shadow work, Dr. West affirmed. Not elimination but integration. The continuing journey. On their last scheduled session, David brought in a gift, a small sculpture of Janus, the Roman god with 2 faces, one looking forward and one looking back. I saw this and thought of our work together, he explained. I used to think I had to choose between being strong or being vulnerable. Now I understand they're two faces of the same thing. Dr. West nodded. Jung would approve of your symbolism. He believed wholeness came not from perfection, but from embracing our full humanity, shadows and all. I still hear my father's voice sometimes, David admitted. I don't think that ever completely goes away. Probably not, she agreed. But now you recognize it for what it is. A voice, not the voice. Just one perspective among many possible perspectives. As he prepared to leave, David paused at the door. You know, I spent my whole life trying to be someone my father would finally approve of. I never realized that wasn't actually what I needed. What did you need? To approve of myself, he said simply. Shadows, and all. This recognition represents the deepest truth of shadow work, that our journey toward wholeness is not about becoming someone new, but about coming home to who we already are beneath the layers of adaptation and defense. As Jung himself wrote, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. The shadow, when integrated, rather than rejected, becomes not our enemy, but our ally, a source of creativity, authenticity, and power that emerges not despite our wounds, but through them. Research from the field of post-traumatic growth suggests that this integration is not merely therapeutic, but potentially transformative. A 2021 meta-analysis of studies on resilience found that individuals who successfully integrated difficult experiences showed greater capacity for meaningful connection, clearer sense of purpose, and deeper appreciation for life than their pre-trauma baseline. This doesn't mean that shadow work is ever truly complete. As we grow and change, new aspects of ourselves may be rejected, new defenses constructed. The process is cyclical, calling us repeatedly toward greater wholeness, but with each cycle, we bring more consciousness to the journey. We learn to recognize more quickly when we're projecting, to hold our pain with greater compassion, to choose connection over protection. We discover that our greatest strength lies not in invulnerability, but in our capacity to remain open in the face of uncertainty. As the philosopher and psychologist William James observed, the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. Shadow work offers us precisely this opportunity, to alter not just our thoughts, but our relationship to our thoughts, not just our feelings, but our relationship to our feelings. In the silent moments of honest self-reflection, in the courageous acts of vulnerability, in the compassionate embrace of all we have been, and all we might become, this is where true power resides, not in the absence of pain, but in its transformation. The shadow, when brought into the light, doesn't disappear, it becomes something else entirely, the very foundation of an authentic and integrated self. And in that integration lies a power that no external armor could ever provide, the power to be fully human in a world that so often encourages us to be anything but. As you reflect on your own shadow aspects, remember that what we resist most strongly in ourselves often holds the key to our deepest healing. The parts of yourself that you have deemed unacceptable, unlovable, or shameful are not obstacles to your growth, but gateways to it. The question is not whether you have a shadow, we all do, but whether you will have the courage to turn toward it with compassion, rather than away from it in fear. In that choice lies all the difference between a life of authentic power. As Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The path to power through pain begins with a single step, the willingness to see yourself completely, without judgment or condemnation. In that seeing lies the seed of transformation, not into someone different, but into someone whole, and wholeness, it turns out, is what we have been seeking all along.